Greetings YouTube and welcome to the Blue Corner into a Cardfight Vanguard deck profile. We have a new format among us, so I figured it's time that I start updating my decks. And the first thing I'm going to do is give you guys an updated Draconic Vanquisher deck profile, because Narus are, of course, the deck I go to whenever it comes to this kind of things. Gears are going to be a bit because I don't have a second delay Blazer Dragon, and there's a very good chance I'm going to need it. And Overlord, I'm currently in the process of trying to figure out a build I like. I actually tried playtesting it against this, and I got demolished. One game, I just got smacked around, and then the second game, I got decked out playing that deck against this, of all things. I do say this with a grim satisfaction, though, because obviously I do like this a little bit more than Kagero, but yeah. So that's where we're currently at, and then the other decks I own, Nectar, Grand Blue, those will be updated when their appropriate booster sets come out, although I'll probably do CFA games with at least Nitros, because I have like a fear of playing Asha on CFA, given the up and down quality of the player base there. So with that all being said, let's dive right into this. The Vanquisher deck itself has changed up a fair bit since the last time I featured on this. I've had time to become accustomed to some of the cards we got of the set, and my opinions on some of them have changed, mostly because I'm not as angry about how disappointed I was with what we got out of set 9. I'm still disappointed, but considering how badly they screwed up with Oracle Think Tank in the Trinity Dragon booster, I suddenly don't feel as upset about Thunderspike, because at least we got a couple bones thrown at us, which is more than I can say for Susano decks. So with that being said, let's actually kick this thing off. So for the starting Vanguard, I am still rocking Wildborn Dragoon. I was actually playing a Skatic a while ago, but I kept coming back to this for the reasons I mentioned in the last time I talked about this deck, and that is, he is guaranteed binding, as opposed to a Skatic requiring a retire to go off in order to go off. In addition to that, this build uses a bit more soul, and this guy is guaranteed soul, so he's just a bit more flexible for a starter as opposed to a Skatic, but a Skatic may in fact come back into the deck depending on what we get in future sets, because I expect us to get a new Grade 3 Vanquisher the next time Narus gets support. Then for the Grade 3s, you have your 4 Vanquisher. The GB2 skill during your opponent's turn does come up at least once per game, so that's just something to keep in the back of the mind. But more often than not, though, the important part about Vanquisher is that he has the Vanquisher name, and he is a guaranteed retire bind if your opponent at least has something in the front row and it does not resist, which helps set up your engine, because this deck, it is aggressive control in the purest sense. You aren't really playing the control game with the intention of grinding your opponent down and just trying to out-resource them. You're just killing their cards to set up for your big pushes with your powerful stride units that make your columns really big. It's much like how Neo Nectar blooms units with the intention of powering up their columns to huge numbers. We just don't hit those kind of numbers yet. And then for the backup Grade 3, I am running Great Composure Dragon. So Great Composure is a card I've always really liked in this kind of deck, and right now he's actually a pretty solid pick. On Rearguard he's 9k, but on Vanguard he's 12. And because he's 12, certain decks have troubles hitting you unless they happen to hit triggers or have boosters, because at 12,000, 11k attackers can't touch you, aka unboosted Melums. And because of that, the Gear Chronicle player has to do things a little bit differently than what they would like to. And again, short of them hitting a trigger, they can't go Melum, History Maker, Melum, History Maker, Melum, and then Phoenix, because they have to use their booster for one of those plays, and then for the other plays, they can't do much, and you can 5k their other lines. Like, Upstream Dragon is the only thing that can reliably attack this guy, and even then, though, that's like once, and more often than not, Upstream doesn't really come at you with a booster, but the defensive prowess is very nice against decks that rely on multiple attacks of smaller things. It has some uses against Grand Blue as well, given that they don't leave anything in the front row for you to retire bind off a Vanquisher anyway. So at that point, you might as well ride this guy and be able to block their attacks easier, because Negro Lazy can't attack you unboosted. Negro Rook you can 5k. A Negro Rook with a booster column you can 10k in most situations. Yeah, a Negro Rook with a 5k, you can 10k. A Negro Rook with a 7k behind it, though, is a different story. But furthermore, even when G-guarding, this guy still has his applications because, for instance, say you have Vitris and he is live. So that's a 20k shield. You're now at 32, that is enough to 2-pass an unboosted stride. With another 10k, that puts you at 43, which is enough to no-pass an unboosted stride. And with Bulwark Dragon and his plus 10k power, that puts you at 37, which is enough to no-pass an unboosted stride for just your heal trigger, whereas if you were on Vanquisher and you did this, it would be a 2-pass. So it's just those little things that can help you use less hand to guard in a deck that desperately likes to have as much hand as it can because we're playing control. So that's just my piece on Great Composure Dragon. In the future, he will probably be dropped for when we get a new Vanquisher and hopefully a good grade 3 that has a solid rearguard skill. But right now, you can run this guy, you can run Blitz Spear, and it'd be fine. I'm not a fan of Descendant or Kaiser at the moment, but at least with Kaiser and Crimson, you have Legion options so you don't deck out. But I think this guy's 12,000 body is really good for the deck. Then for the 2s, we're running 4 Shatura, not much to say on here. 2 Voltorn Dragon, 2 Rock Clam Dragoon, and that's because I needed to cut cards to make room for 3 Martial Arts Dragons. So I kind of harped on this card a lot. I ripped this thing a new one. I said it was bad and you should feel bad for playing it. And admittedly, I might have been just a little bit too harsh on the card, as he's not outright garbage, but he could have been a lot better. But for what he does, it's actually not a bad card to run given the current format. His mere existence may deter people from calling units to the front row and trying to rush you, which is a good thing for a clan that doesn't really like getting rushed early game. Likewise, though, if your opponent does call something up to the front row, say they're going first and they decide to be cheeky and call a 2 alongside their 2 to try and get some extra attacks off, some damage off, you can ride this thing, kill the 2, and now you have an automatic Thunderstrike 1 going eventually into your stride turn, which will put you Thunderstrike 2, which turns on a good portion of your deck. Likewise, if you're in a situation where you can't stride, or you don't want them to get that first stride, but you don't want them to breeze you, you can actually just ride this guy, get the counterblast, kill the thing, and you've more or less made up for the neg 1 of re-riding again by taking away a card during the early game. And ironically enough, despite being a G deck, Shatura and Martial Arts Dragon actually give you a better early game than some other G-based decks. The plus 3,000 at Thunderstrike 2 also comes up because we're running 6k grade 1s, which helps you make numbers, whereas these guys fall short of being able to hit numbers with your 6ks, and that is something I like to take into consideration when it comes to this kind of stuff. Furthermore, these guys are gen break, so they are a little bit slow to go off, but they are guaranteed retire binds, so I still like having them in here. But that's all I can really say about the 2 lineup. Like, we already know that these cards are good, and this card is not completely terrible. It just, he could have been a little bit better. Then for the 1s, 4 Perfect Guards, 4 Stride Assists, 4 Chain Bolts, and lastly, 3 VNs. No, 3 Fatines. So, the way that this deck is built is based off of the lists that topped those Japanese tournaments where they were maxing out Fatine. I haven't, because as much as I would like to try the 6th grade 3s, I have found myself either not able to ride in some cases, or having to -2 to stride, or -1 technically, but because you are negging yourself an extra card, but you get the 3rd check. But like, it's called the suboptimal stride, where you don't have the 3 or the stride assist, and so I cut the 4th Fatine for 3rd grade 3, and we'll see where it goes from there. But basically, your first goal with this deck is to get the Thunderstrike 2 to turn these on, because once they're live, they're +1s. And they're pretty easy to meet +1s, as Thunderstrike 2 without Gen Break actually is possible in the early game. And you can still hit relevant numbers with these things if you set up your columns properly. Like, sadly, this and these 2 will not, like, Fatine and your 9Ks won't do it, but you have 7 things that can go above 9k, so you can still hit the 16 and higher threshold with them. And these, with Chain Bolts added onto them, becomes 8, which is just enough to hit those numbers. Conquest on these will make them 16, so any 7k booster behind them will make them 21, which is, yeah, that is still enough to, no, not 21, what am I thinking, no, 23, but it's still enough to force out a 15k shield, and Voltage plus these can still hit for some numbers. So, even though the 6k is undesirable, she's basically a cheaper and bigger Rising Phoenix in a deck that definitely likes having hand advantage. Like, she's basically your 5th, 6th, and 7th draw triggers, of which I am running them. Then for the triggers, we're running 4 Vanquisher crits, 4 unflipping stands, 4 draws, and 4 heals, because rainbow triggers are actually pretty decent for this deck. 14s basically are your extra draws, and VMAX himself is basically your extra crit in that he is damage. Yes, it's not optimal to VMAX when your opponent's at 4 going to 5, but sometimes you just need to get them to 5 so that on the following turn you can go into a Conquest or a Voltage that's going to actually push them for lethal. Sometimes though that doesn't, sometimes it's better to go the other way around, but I'm just saying though, like, you can get away with running the rainbows because your other cards in the deck make up for not running certain ratios of certain triggers. So let's just quickly pack this up and we will get on to the extra deck. So for the G Zone, we are running our 4 Voltages. You will first stride Voltage many games. It just depends if you have the heal trigger in hand and you want to get the GB2. Ideally, you will go first, have a heal trigger, G Guardian, and then on your first stride, this guy will be able to get his GB3 effect off. Sometimes that doesn't happen. If you don't have a heal, or if you don't, like, no, it's not just only that, but, like, basically, when you first stride Voltage, it's because you want to get the GB2, or you don't really have any rear guards to put additional pressure on the opponent. So you might as well at least go with this guy and get the hit and retire a bind and get at Thunderstrike 2. If you have rear guards, you are probably going to be striding into a different card instead. But it is a bit of a waste for striding him, but it's not the worst thing in the world too. Obviously, as the game goes on, this guy becomes even stronger. So generally speaking, you're going to go Voltage and then Conquest, and Conquest again maybe, or Voltage if you've built up a large bind zone or something else. But it would be nice if we get a Growwatch clone. Then for the other 4s, 4 Conquests. I'm back to 4 again, as I've just found myself really needing the additional power. Like, the main deck is Counterblast heavy, but most of your strides are free, so you can actually afford to do things like Counterblast 1 for Voltage, and then use a Chain Bolt in addition to a Voltage Horn if it helps you get to a certain Thunderstrike number, because you have Conquest Dragon to pick up the slack and at least buff at your front row so that you can pressure your opponent while building up, while unflipping and building up Counterblasts for your eventual VMAX push. 2 VMAX, I mean, not much I can really say on him that hasn't been talked about before. I already went into this before. The burn effect is nice. The multi-attack around resist units is also pretty damn good. He's a very solid 2 of. You could run 3, but I do like running the 1 of Voltec Dragon just as much, as he is a way to retire bind while not being on a Voltage as your Vanguard. There will be games where, again, you're on Great Composure Dragon and you will have built up just enough of a bind zone off of Wild Run Dragoon, Martial Arts Dragon, maybe Shatura, maybe Voltage Horn, and you will be able to proc this guy's skill and get some more binds off, thus allowing you to get closer to Thunderstrike 4 and Thunderstrike 5 for your other skills. In addition to that, if you happen to have a rear guards like Voltage Horn Dragon in, what's his name, Rock Climb Dragoon with Chain Bolt in play, you can get the Thunderstrike 4 before this guy's attack, Counterblast 1, wipe off 2 more cards, and end at Thunderstrike 6 going into your Voltage turn. He is a very viable first stride or mid-game stride, and he's also a stride you can go into if you have no rear guards but you're at Thunderstrike 3, because he's at the very worst a 36 attack solo, more if he's got a booster, and you'll get a kill. Like, there are just times where VMAX attacking the board isn't going to cut it because you need something to die, and they might actually, like, overguard with their rear guards to keep it safe, and you just want that thing dead. Like, an example was I was playing against Night Rose the other day, and instead of VMAXing his 2 back row Negro Bones, I instead went for Voltec because I wanted those Negro Bones out of there. So I did, and they were gone, and it actually hurt him. And then lastly, Once a Breeze for just when your opponent is staying on 2 and they don't ride up, then you can at least breeze punish them and turn on your deck. And then for the G Guardians, 2 Bulwark Dragons, 1 Vitra, and 1 Dismal. Bulwark Dragon for this deck is actually really good, especially the 10k shield for Thunderstrike 3, like, that's really easy to get. But the retire effect, even though it may not be the best out there, it still has its uses. For instance, if you're on Great Composure Dragon, or just not on Vanquisher, and you need to conquest your opponent, you can have Bulwark Dragon kill off one of their rear guards so that when you conquest, you can have it kill off the other one and get the full 10k buff, as opposed to conquesting just one unit to get the 5k buff. That's what I consider to be a suboptimal conquest. This guy helps you get the optimal conquests. And that's it for the profile itself. Hope you guys enjoyed the video for what it was. I really liked a lot of the theory behind this deck, and I've been wanting to talk about it for a while now. By the time I actually was about to shoot this, the ban list got announced, so I just figured I'd wait until I got to play with this even more, and just do it as a profile while also explaining the theories behind why I felt many of the cards were played in the way they were. And I'd like to think that this is at least a good starting point for what Naros can do in the new format, as I don't think, at least as far as the top decks go, things are going to change that much. I mean, Gears got taken down a peg, but they're still going to be widely played. Night Rose will probably come up as the more prominent Grand Blue deck, but we'll still see 7-runner. Sanctuary Guard is still going to be a thing, and some of these techs in the deck, such as Great Composure Dragon and Martial Arts Dragon, are actually pretty good for those matchups. But we'll see how this pans out. Naros, though, Vanquisher, in spite of how lackluster his support in G-Set 9 was, has at least managed to do some stuff. I'd say he's a very high tier 2 deck with the potential to become 1.5, depending on how the rest of the format and future sets pan out. Whether or not we will get main set support, or a character booster, or maybe, God help us, a trial deck, or a clan booster, who knows. But I am confident, though, that at least before this season of Vanguard G Next is done, Hayo will get more support because he's on the rival team, and as a result, Vanquisher will probably get his new Grade 3, a new Stride, a new G Guardian, a new Perfect Guard, as we have seen with recent booster sets. Until then, though, thank you all for watching. This is BlueStar899, jacking out.